guys, welcome to another episode of the CDP Growth Show. On this show, we talk everything marketing and sales tech stacks and how some of the fastest growing B2B SaaS companies are structuring theirs. Now, on today's show, I'm joined by Ajay, who is the current founder of TheHouseMonk. Ajay, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Joseph. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, Now, Ajay, before we kind of, dive into kind of the main part of the episode, just give my audience like a really quick, kind of 30-second summary of, first of all, what TheHouseMonk is, and then really who you guys serve.
Yeah, so the TheHouseMonk is a B2B SaaS platform. It's targeted at real estate and property managers. So if you're a rental property manager, if you're a co-living company, co-working company, anyone who's in the business of managing real estate in some capacity, we have a software, end-to-end software platform for them to onboard customers, handle their finances, take stock of their inventory, manage the facilities. It's really a 360-degree solution that their entire team can get on to make sure that these assets are managed in the best possible way.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. And how long have you guys been kind of going for now? When did you guys start?
So we've been in the real estate tech space for about 6 years now. So actually, me and my co-founder earlier, we'd started a property management company of our own, which we ran for about 4 years or so. And then we sold that business. And then from our learnings, we kind of like built out this particular software. So the TheHouseMonk in its present form is a B2B SaaS company. We've been around for a year and a half, touching 2 years now.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. And really, something that one of the first questions that I really kind of like asking the guests is, how did you, what really made you start TheHouseMonk? Like, what was the meaning behind it? Like, why did you want to solve this problem?
When we were running our own business in the property management industry, there were two key learnings for us, right?
Yeah.
First is that when you're managing real estate, it's an incredibly operations intensive business.
Yeah.
There are so many moving parts, and physically, like, these assets are so far away. Right? So we have one building here and the next building is possibly in another city.
Yeah.
So making sure that the operations engine is running very smoothly, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
The second point was that we had so many different softwares that we were using internally, right? We were using QuickBooks to manage our finances. We were using a whole bunch of Google spreadsheets to manage a lot of, unstructured data. We were using WhatsApp for customer communication.
Got it. Yeah.
And we found it very difficult to, bring everything together.
Yeah.
So based on these two key insights, that's the reason why we built the TheHouseMonk, to make sure that the operations of managing real estate assets be streamlined. Centralized it into one hub, and that just makes it so much easier to run the business.
Got it. Makes sense. And, before we kind of dive into the more kind of intensive, how you've structured your marketing and sales tech and, the kind of the more, I call them the deeper questions, how have you, again, something that I really like asking is, let's say you were starting TheHouseMonk again today, right? So, back to basics. What would be like, and I'm sure you've used lots of different growth strategies to get where you are now, but like, what would be like one, if you have to pick one strategy, and this could be a channel, it could be a strategy that you guys have used, what would be like your go-to strategy, right? To kind of get that first bit of traction.
So what's really worked for us is putting out very valuable content on LinkedIn. Yeah. So that's number one. So the combination of very valuable content on LinkedIn, put it together, that's given us almost 40% of all of our clients right now. So I would definitely start there.
Got it. Makes sense. And kind of walk us through that kind of LinkedIn process. Is that just more kind of just organic content, or is that?
Yeah. So I think with respect to content itself, I can break down content into two segments. So one that's really worked for us is very deeply researched reports that we put out. So we do industry snapshots, geography snapshots, best practices, a lot of techniques. So that is one, which is reports. And the second thing that works for us is webinars. We typically do a webinar once a month, and we invite a bunch of panelists onto the webinar. Once again, very deeply researched. We put in a lot of effort to make sure that it's typically 45-minute webinar. We train the panelists, we make sure that every minute is useful, and we get a few hundreds of, participants in every webinar. So these are the two channel strategies that really work. These are the two content strategies that really work for us. On why LinkedIn, I think that's really because, one, organically, I think LinkedIn is growing very well as a platform. And more than anything else, when you're trying to see, at the end of the day, like, it's a user, right? The same user will be on LinkedIn for certain portions of the day, will be on Instagram for some part of the day, will be on Twitter for some part of the day, will be on YouTube on some part of the day. But the really important thing to keep in mind is that when they're on LinkedIn, they're actually on business mode. right? And let's say that I've come out with a very deeply researched report. I can put the same ad to them on Instagram, and I can put the same ad to them on LinkedIn. Just that when they're on LinkedIn, they're already switched on, right? So they're very much focused on doing their
on
work.
business.
Much more likely that, so much more likely they're going to click on it, download it, consume the content. So that's the reason why, we're really pro on LinkedIn. Some strategies on LinkedIn that's worked for us, maybe if I can share. I think one very important point that a lot of people overlook is that the LinkedIn profile of founders and the LinkedIn profile of all the employees in the company, that's more valuable than your LinkedIn page. So make sure that the founders keep posting all the time. Make sure your employees keep posting all the time. Make sure you're constantly reaching out. Make sure you're constantly pinging people. So for us, actually, what's worked is we've done paid campaigns on LinkedIn as well. They haven't been as effective as just doing the organic campaigns.
Organic campaigns. Yeah. No, I think
that's another point to keep in mind.
I think building that like thought leadership is like with like your organic, just your like founder's profile is hands down one of the best ways to start getting traction quickly with LinkedIn. I think paid works, but it's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different strategy. I think so. I think if you're just getting started on LinkedIn, thought leadership is the best way. I agree with that completely. And now kind of moving more onto kind of your how you've really gone about building, because a lot of we get like a lot of early stage founders listening to this show, and I think something that's very common with a lot of early stage founders is a lot of the time they start the business, they start their SaaS, and very quickly they've brought 15 different softwares that they didn't really need. Right, you'll have seen this as well. When actually they could have just been using when in reality they could have just been using 3 or 4, right? So it's kind of I think what would be really interesting is to kind of understand what have been like the key components to your kind of growth stack, both on the marketing side and the sales side. We'll kind of obviously dig further into this, but what have been like them key softwares for you guys?
Okay, so we use Lucia for doing research and getting leads. Obviously we use hunter.io, we use improver.io as well. So these are all tools that obviously the sales team uses to like hunt and get information about prospects. We use BuzzSumo to find out what's trending, what people are talking about, our potential audience, just to analyze social media trends. We use a lot of MailChimp for running our drip campaigns for people who are already in our subscriber list. Hubspot essentially brings it all together to make sure that the marketing team is aligned. Also, that becomes our central repository for all of our leads, all of our customers, all of our support tickets, everything. So we do a lot of that. We use Zoom for organizing our webinars and like executing these campaigns. But so this is pretty much the crux of most of the softwares that we use.
Got it. Makes sense. And what have been, obviously HubSpot kind of acts as that like main centralized like data point or like system, right? But like what have been, if we focus more on, so for instance, I know you guys do a lot of like LinkedIn content, and you said that's been one of your growth channels. How have you got any softwares that kind of help you on the content, on the kind of content arm and content piece? Because I know there's tons of softwares out there that are then kind of content like tools, right? So have you got like, for instance, could be like an SEO research tool or?
So we've obviously been also, this is, you're saying to do research and identify tools identify the content. So we use, I think, Yoast SEO to get information about how to optimize the SEO. We use Frolla and HubSpot landing pages to capture the leads that actually come in. We use keywords everywhere to identify about what are the keywords that we should be using. So there's a whole bunch of tools. So it's not like one or the other is much better, but it's more about just using. So we just use it as
and having that kind of key stack. That makes sense. And I think something that, again, because you get a lot of these early stage founders, they get a bit trigger happy, and before they know it, they've got 20 different softwares they didn't need. So like where do you see a lot of founders going wrong, and just maybe marketing teams, teams that are building out these different marketing stacks? Where do you see a lot of teams going wrong? And maybe you can talk from your own experience.
That's a very good question. I think one thing that we've done in the past ourselves, which I see a lot of other founders doing as well, is that people tend to so people try to scale and automate before they've nailed the correct strategy and the channel, and that is such a big mistake. You need to start by being scrappy. Like, you need to do most of it yourself. Like, I understand that you can't run so many different campaigns yourself, and your mental bandwidth gets, but all of that is all right, because when you automate too early and when you start thinking scale too early, and that becomes a compromise for your strategy or your channel, that's really not going to work out in the long run. So one thing that I've noticed is that, so for us, it took us about a year of experimentation to get to strategy channel fit, right? So it took us a long time to find out that reports and webinars on LinkedIn works for us, right? And now there can be thousands of possible strategy channel combinations. What I would really advise is that keep experimenting with different strategies and different channels, and wait till you get that click, and you will know it, right? Like whenever you've had that fit, you know it. After that, you can start looking for automation tools, and how do I scale it up, and how do I go 10x on my budget? And so that's all. So the technology is available to enable you. Don't worry about that. There are enough tools. There is no shortage of SaaS software to help you automate your marketing. But I think step one is really understanding what works, and don't scale too soon. Get the strategy channel right, and then go on to the next step.
Yeah, I think like you said there, so many, particularly early stage founders, so many of them, they build out these massive stacks and they've not even hit, product market fit yet, right? And they've not even got to that stage yet where they can really say which channel's working, which channel's not working. So I think the point there that doing it manually first and then moving to the automated side is really important, really. And what's what's been like a like a recent, what's been like one of the most recent changes you've made to your personal stack, in terms of, have you added a software recently that's been quite pivotal, or what's been like the most recent change that you've made?
So I think the most recent change that we did was we were using Hubspot for sales. We were using something else for scheduling our social media posts. So marketing was on a completely different stack. And once again, like we had so many different sources of collating our marketing information that there was no central repository for that. So over the last quarter, what we kind of did was we managed to bring everything onto Hubspot. Even though it didn't have all the features that what we wanted it to have. So some of the other tools independently did have a lot more features than what HubSpot marketing actually allows us to have. But we've managed to bring marketing, sales, and customer support onto HubSpot. And we've managed to, So the end-to-end, the entire business team is now on HubSpot. And we spent like a few weeks in March building out all of our dashboards. So from the time the first lead enters into the funnel till they convert as a customer, all the way till customer success. So we managed to build a lot of dashboards on top of our HubSpot data. And that was a massive activity. That's one of the things that is paying off a lot of dividends for us right now.
I think a lot of people don't realize that, I think some companies, they use, like a CRM, like HubSpot, like Marketo, that like centralized point. They use it a little bit and they don't really see the full kind of functionality out of it, or they really use it properly. And, you really, it becomes very, very handy as you start scaling and you've got all these different data points coming in, and it gets a little bit crazy.
It does.
I think it's, like you said, really, really, really important. And look,
actually, like where that helps a lot, that we're starting to notice, right, is that whenever we have weekly reviews, so a lot of our team members and the team leads, they used to spend hours just collating data and putting it together, right, just to present to senior management on what's really happening. Now, obviously, we're saving so much of time over there, and not just in terms of time savings. It's also that now we have a single source of truth. Right. So this metric on the HubSpot dashboard has to be this, and that's your target. If the metric is pointing in that direction, then you've done your job. If not, you've not. Right. So we've kind of like managed to get to that particular state. So obviously saves time. It's automating a lot. Helps us have a single source of truth. So it's a win-win-win. But it takes a lot of effort to set it up.
No, I can imagine. And look, there's been, I'd say probably over the last few years, tools like Segment, tools like, these kind of big CDP players that are starting to come into the market. What we're seeing is a lot of B2B SaaS businesses starting to adopt these kind of like CDP like tools. Now, I know that you're kind of using a bit of an alternative process, or for instance, like Hubspot. So kind of walk us through. I mean, in your case, did you ever consider using a CDP, or was it just what was your kind of perspective around that?
That's a very good question. We're considering it now, and I'll tell you why we haven't used it so far. Even though we're a SaaS company, we've actually adopted a sales assisted SaaS model, in the sense that every customer speaks to our sales team, because there's actually a significant jump to onboard someone onto our system, right? So there's a lot of data migration, there's a lot of training that needs to happen. So we're more of an ERP kind of a player, where if your company has 20 people, all 20 will start using our system. So there's a big sales support that's involved. So that's the reason we chose not to automate the entire process, because typically people come to our website, sign up for a trial, they try it for 2 weeks. After that, they get on to sales. And then there is a good 4 to 6 weeks of just, like internal discussions, a lot of customization requests, and there's a whole bunch of things that happen. So that break, we couldn't bring it onto a CDP. So that's the reason why we chose to have a Hubspot as our central integrator. But now going forward, when we're looking at the next 6 months, so even amongst our current customer roster, we have a few clients who pay us, like $30,000-$40,000 a year, and we have a lot of clients who pay us about $1,000-$3,000 a year, right? So it's a very big spectrum already. Yeah. So we're trying to move on to a CDP, or we're starting to consider implementing a CDP where all the lower ACVs will work on a purely self sign-up model, and our sales team only goes after, they only go elephant hunting. So that is something that we have in plan. So we want to put it in place towards mid to end of this year. So I think that's possibly when, we'll end up having a end-to-end CDP system to evaluate the low ACV customers and make sure they're having a good experience.
Yeah. I think they've, particularly like you said there, for kind of like the lower ACV model, it's particularly useful when you've got, traditionally companies like yourself, you're probably using HubSpot, or you've got a CRM tool in place. I think the CDPs are really becoming like that like 50,000 foot overview that kind of that links everything together, right? And it's that that kind of overarching tool. So I think particularly I think like you said there, when you've got that lower ACV, like the kind of lower ACV model, I think it is particularly useful to really have that in place. And I mean, I think something that again would be, because again, you get all these early stage founders, I keep referencing it, but it's that's the audience we're kind of speaking to. And I think again, a lot of founders, they may not know when to be using a CDP or when to be considering it, right? Obviously, you've got to the stage now where you are, and you're kind of, with a lower ACV model. So what advice would you give to founders in terms of, when they should implement a tool like that? Because I don't think it is for every early stage founder. I think you've got to get to a point, like you said, when you've got enough data. When would you say for new founders?
I think the first thing to keep in mind is that, are you going to be selling upmarket SaaS, or are you going to be selling, to the bottom of the pyramid? If you're considering ACVs of, let's say, like less than $5,000 in Europe or US, I would say a CDP has to be in place on day zero, because that's not a high ACV, right? Like and you won't be able to support your customers with the sales team. So that has to be like part of your day one, or one of your very early launches itself. But let's say if you're looking at even mid-market, let's say from $10,000 to $50,000-$60,000 in ACV, I don't think CDP is like very critical to start off with. I think you can focus on understanding the channels, understanding the strategies, having like a bunch of early customers, and putting together, customer success, right? Essentially, because you're going to have people, right? Like these people are not going to buy without talking to someone or meeting someone. So it should not be a priority if you're selling slightly mid-value or, high-value ACV. But just to put some number around it so that people can understand, I would say like $500,000 to $1 million USD in ARR might be a good point for you to start considering putting a CDP in place.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, like I said, I think you've got to get through that manual phase first to get to the point where you can start automating things, and processes become more streamlined and centralized. Really key point.
That's right.
Really key point. And to kind of to kind of wrap this up again, I think something that we've got all these metrics in SaaS, right? We've got CAC, we've got LTV. It's like just it's metric madness, right? We've got all these different things that SaaS marketers like to throw around. So like, what would you? And there's lots of metrics you can track, but if there's like one metric that you would say, that is just crucial for marketers to be tracking in terms of just really allowing them to understand their customer better, like what would be like that one metric, especially in perhaps them early days, that you really need to be tracking? And this could be the marketing side, it could be the customer success kind of onboarding phase. Like what would you say that kind of one metric is?
So maybe I can talk about a setup where there is a sales team as well, because that's where our expertise
that's your experience.
Comes in. So I would say like MQL divided by SQL, or MQL divided by SAL, like sales accepted leads. I think that's something that you should definitely be tracking, because invariably from my experience, whenever revenue targets aren't hit, marketing always puts the blame on sales, saying, hey, we gave them the lead, and sales always throws it back to marketing, saying all your leads were junk. So so to at least avoid that confusion and making sure everyone's aligned, if your metrics start going very askew, then that there is a very clear mistake in the leads that the marketing team is producing. So that's something that you should be tracking at a weekly or at least at a monthly level, and you should be able to act on it very quickly as well.
Very quickly. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that whenever you've got misalignment between the sales and marketing team, it's just going to cause so many problems. So yeah, I think that probably is probably one of the most important metrics to be tracking, so you don't have that misalignment constantly.
Maybe one more small point I can mention, even though this is not one particular metric as such, I've noticed that a lot of folks in marketing don't actually look at the product usage itself. They just feel that, hey, that's the job of the product manager to look at that. I think that's a mistake. I think marketing, what you're going to market is really going to come from how the product is being used. Once you have like an initial set of users, right? So what are the features people are using, so that you understand what to market to the next set of customers, what type of customers are becoming power users, and like when are they using it. So many key insights that really come out of your product dashboard are all things that marketers should be looking at very, very, very seriously. So even if there is not one single metric, I definitely encourage marketers to look at product usage to truly understand who their customers are and what they're using your software for.
Yeah, I think if the marketing don't have that product information, and they're not, kind of corresponding with the customer support team and the product team, like you're going to have so many issues, and just in terms of the messaging and the positioning, it's just you've got to have that, like I call it the trifecta. You've got to have the sales, the marketing, and the customer support and product all working as one, right? To really have that that kind of marketing, growth success, right? Well, look, AJ, look, it's been really, really awesome having you on the show. I think my audience will really, really value your insights. But yeah, like I said, really, really great. I hope you've enjoyed coming on. And yeah,
Thank
guys,
you so much.